My name is Jackie M, and today I am covering Chinese vegetables. Okay, I've got a whole bunch of different varieties of Chinese vegetables. I'm sorry they look a little bit sad. That's because they've been sitting in my fridge for a few days. And this is what we call kailan, or sometimes we call it Chinese broccoli. Look, virtually all these vegetables can be steamed, they can be fried, they can be mixed in with other ingredients and that sort of stuff. But I'm just going to show you how to stir fry it. Very, very basic. In its most basic form, you can in fact do a stir fry with just garlic and salt, right? So that was quite common growing up in Malaysia. So you can just have salt and garlic in your pantry, and what you would do, you would mince the garlic, toss in the vegetables with some oil obviously, fry it up, and then just sprinkle with some salt, cover it, and there you go. This is oyster sauce, and the amount of actual oysters used in making these kinds of sauces vary depending on the quality of the oyster sauce, but generally they're fairly negligible, all right? Don't expect this to have come from like a full bottle of oysters. It doesn't work that way. Now, tapioca starch, all right, it says, just ignore the label. Tapioca starch is something that's quite commonly used as a thickening agent in a lot of Asian stir fries, right? Don't have this, just use cornstarch. Cornstarch may not give you the same kind of starchiness, so you may have to increase the amount of equivalent cornstarch. And garlic, I mentioned before, it's almost like a foregone conclusion that you should keep some garlic in your fridge if you're doing Asian cooking. And another ingredient you should keep in your fridge is ginger, right? And before I go on any further, I just want to thank Lenovo Australia, who support me by providing all the hardware that I use in all my broadcasts. And also, of course, I want to thank Sunbeam Australia, who provide all the cooking appliances that I use in all my broadcasts and also in my upcoming stage demonstration. These I mentioned, these are kailan, or Chinese broccoli. This is what they look like. Now, I remember growing up in Malaysia, my mom would teach me basically to tear these off like this, right, until you're down to your stem, and then you've got a stem here. Sometimes they can be a little bit tough, and what you would want to do is you then get a little knife to peel the skin off, right? So a lot of these stems would be half peeled, just to kind of make them, sometimes you can find Chinese greens, especially if they're a little bit older, that they can be quite fibrous and tough to digest. I don't go through the trouble of what my mom does sort of thing. I basically grab a bunch of vegetables and cut them up like this, especially when I'm using it for my business, right? And the other thing she used to do was get me to sort through like the more yellow greens and to pull them out. When you're doing stir fry, it's important that everything cooks at the same, everything cooks up evenly, right? So what you want to do is you want to cook the stems because they're tougher and they're thicker. And if they're quite thick, you can cut them in half like this, which is what I do, right? Okay. And then when you throw them in your wok, you want to throw the stems in first, followed by the greens, okay? So I'm going to be a little bit exotic here, because I'm going to use the oyster sauce in my stir fry. I'm going to put a dash of soya sauce in it, but I'm also going to drizzle some Chinese wine in it as well, right? And that really is just kind of like a hangover from when my mom used to cook it with beef slices. So what she would do, have sliced beef separately marinated with a bit of pepper, a bit of soy sauce, and a bit of cornstarch or tapioca starch, and then and then she'll have some ginger. So I'm going to throw some ginger in. Again, not necessary, just simply because I really love the flavors of the beef and kailan, which my mom used to work. So I'm going to follow those ingredients there. So garlic, I'm just going to. What we're going to do towards the end is just thicken up the sauce so it sticks better to your vegetable dish. And we're going to do that by creating what they call a slurry, right? Which is tapioca starch with a bit of water drizzled over your stir fry. Okay, so this is heating up really, really nicely. I'm just going to throw in some oil. And next I'm going to throw in the garlic and the ginger. So this is just browning up very, very quickly. And I'm going to throw in first the stems, remember? And you can just smell the ginger coming through. But like I say, ginger is optional if you're just doing a straight up Chinese stir-fry vegetable dish. Okay? And as far as using oyster sauce, I've got to mention as well, oyster sauce, what you can do if you were steaming these vegetables or boiling them, you can actually just serve them with some drizzled oyster sauce. And now, the other thing I've got to mention as well, I know I'm going through too in-depth now at this rate. I'm just going to throw in the rice wine. And see how well this is heating up, right? With oyster sauce, one thing you've got to keep in mind with Asian condiments, right? Different brands of the same kind of sauce have different nuances to them. The variation can be quite large, right? So when you follow an Asian recipe and it says use X amount, always adapt it to whatever your preferences are and whatever brand it is you're using. Some oyster sauces may be sweeter, some may be more salty, and some may be thicker, some may be, but they're all just kind of different. Same thing with soya sauce as well, right? Some can be darker, more pungent in flavor, some are very light. They're all just different. So always keep that in mind when you're cooking Asian food and just be prepared to adapt, right? So this is all in. I'm going to drizzle some oyster sauce. There's a little bit runny. I just remembered I actually added some water to it the other day because it was getting down to the bottom where it was a bit hard to get it out, right? So now, if you're using an oyster sauce that's too salty, you can in fact add a pinch of sugar, or you can kind of like simmer this with a bit of water, a bit of sugar, and then use that for your vegetables, right? Otherwise, sometimes they can be just overly salty. Now, soya sauce, I've got not a whole lot left in here as well. Drizzle of soya sauce. So far what's in here are garlic, ginger, the vegetables, oyster sauce, soya sauce, and also the Chinese rice wine. Again, I'm being fancy here. If you were just doing this at home, you can omit the ginger, you can omit the rice wine, and even if you don't have the oyster sauce, you can just use some soya sauce if you want, right? Now, I'm just going to throw in some water. And just turn this down a little bit. And finally, I mentioned the slurry, which is the tapioca starch mixture. And again, if you don't have tapioca starch, you can use cornstarch. I'm just going to use about half a teaspoon, about a teaspoon of tapioca starch here. And the way you use it, just add a bit of water to it and just mix it in, right? Don't do this too far ahead of time because the starch, the tapioca flour does settle. So if that happens, you just got to stick your finger in and mix it in again, right? And you do this generally towards the end. If you think the stems aren't cooking yet, just cover it with the lid and let the steam just help with the cooking process a little bit. The Chinese greens, don't cook them too long. And the other thing I forget to mention as well, now the most well-known, I guess the most popular Chinese green among Westerners is baby bok choy, right? I hope you're familiar with baby bok choy. In Asian grocery stores, they're sometimes called Shanghai bok choy. So this is done, and this smells fantastic. By the way, I hope you can see this. Thank you guys. I'll see you again. Ciao.